What, you got 4 outs or something?
Yeah, and an Ethernet, but no NPUs needed.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, everybody on the internet and the people that showed up in person. Welcome to a live stream with Jason Bullock. For those of you that don't know who he has been the programmer and operator for some pretty awesome bands, including 9 Inch Nails, which most of you know him from his videos on YouTube, but also Jane's Addiction, Korn, and Wiz Khalifa. Sounds like my microphone's cutting out a little bit. That's all right. We'll be good with that. So, without further ado, we're going to bring up the lights here, light the man up. We will take his video stream, and we will unmute him, and off we go with the masterclass with Jason Bullock.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Bullock. Welcome to the masterclass. Today's content, what we're going to talk about, is busking in a hurry. In a lot of cases, we have to show up at festivals, and you have 2 or 3 hours, and you still have to make a show. You know, it doesn't matter if you don't have a desk or anything else. You have to figure out a show. The show is going to happen one way or another. So over the years, I've decided to make a very simplified Punt page because trying to write out a complex one can sometimes take a lot of time, and we just don't have it sometimes. So rather than going and whining about it, it's just go and do your job. So if you'll excuse me, I have to have some notes because I'm trying to keep this in some sort of order. Some interesting things to know before you start. What's the most important thing as a designer? Who, how, and why. If you know those 3 things, you can decide not only what lights you're going to use, but what sort of layout you need on your console. You know, if you have 8 or 9 trucks, it's very easy to have 3 days or a week to program and write your show. In some of the bands I've worked for, you get 3 hours. And you know, we all want to make the best show we can. That's what all this is about. But in this day and age, especially when you're not just running a console, you might be running video as well, you might be running special effects as well, you're dealing with the set layout, you're the one who answers to management and production. So knowing who, how, and why, it helps define the application of how you want to set up your desk, what colors you're going to use, how active your show is going to be. I mean, let's face it, you know, if you're playing something that's a lot of slow songs, you certainly don't need any flash and trash to go along. But, you know, you need to be able to adapt. I mean, especially if you work within the hip-hop industry and stuff, you have to learn how to adapt. So what I've done over the years is developed a Punt page that works for me because everybody has a different way of doing things. I just know what works in my case, and that's kind of what I'm here to share today. It's also worth mentioning that what are you trying to light? Are you lighting for film? You're lighting for TV? You know, because once we all have TV shows and stuff, all of a sudden you have, audience trusses and more spotlights, and if you're filming it, it can be a lot, but it helps define what's going on. One of the best ways I've found to be prepared, especially if you're working for new people, is do your research. If you got hired by some new band and you're just starting, unless they're completely new, which is rare in these days, you have to know what the person before you was doing, and if the artist liked it, and if management liked it, and if everybody liked it. Because if they didn't and you're replacing someone, then you don't want to do the same mistakes that they had to do. And it's very simple in a lot of cases, with the Punt page that I use, which we'll get to in a little bit, is that you can just change the color combinations, but it doesn't really, to me, you might have 5 lights, you might have 10 lights, you might have a beautiful rig like this, or you might have, 500 moving lights. And you have to assess your time and that kind of stuff on what you really have the ability to work with. The other thing is know your clients. In a lot of cases, you have to know who the management people are, who's the artistic person, who's the lead singer's buddy that's going to come out and stand next to you and go, all right, that's cool, nope, that's not cool. And having to do that, it's not a time you want to turn around and to somebody you don't know and go, hey, get out of my joint, man. This is my space. Get out of here. And then you walk backstage after, and they're like, dude, that's the manager's kid. And you're like, wow. All right, so I messed that one up. Note to self, don't say anything until you know who you're dealing with. All right, so one of the other important things that even happened here is know the rig. You don't always have a choice, and management doesn't always want to spend the money on something new. You may have a floor package you're traveling with. Heck, you may have 9 trucks that you're traveling with. But if you don't have anything, whining about it isn't going to help. It's going to make you look bad. And that's the last thing you want. Well, I don't have what I needed. And you're like, well, but I have all these lights. So what am I going to do about it? Well, just get it done. Design choices and stuff. It doesn't mean no show. Again, as I said, the show's going to happen whether or not you want to. So if we break a couple of things down, if you're working with a solo artist who's got 6 spotlights and a band, you don't have to worry about some of these elements as much. But obviously key components, front light, stage light, and all your beam effects and stuff. A lot of artists these days have a person standing down in a spot, and the rest of the look behind them is, something completely different. It's like 2 isolated elements. And you have to know that when laying out your Punt page and trying to get your stuff laid out, because if there's no spots, you need to have a front light fader to be able to light these people. Somehow they got to be lit. And separating some of that out is part of my methodology with this. The other thing is show integration. Again, if you're responsible for video and everything else, let's face it, in a lot of these days, management and everybody else will consider video more important, which isn't necessarily fair. I suppose it's one of the reasons I like having no video on some shows. You can worry about it and you can make it, but we all know that a lot of artists these days spend a lot of money on content. And if you have cameras or iMag, you need to know your director. I usually work that out by sending the content to the video director in the back, and they can overlay it on all the iMag. And you know that the contents there is going to be right, the iMag is going to be blended together, as long as you get things set up in a proper way. Anyway, so to step through some of the interesting things I'm doing. Hold on, I need to check my notes again, I'm sorry. What are you responsible for? As I was just saying, if you're responsible for all these other things, you need to prioritize which one is more important. Now, in the case of how I have this built, the thing that people in the audience are going to notice as much is timing. Context of the look, context of everything else is pretty irrelevant because the audience will notice if you're not in time. And more importantly, the artist will know if you're not in time. So I can't stress that enough, that make sure you hear a song and you're going to make sure you do something. So if you look here, this is a basic, look, hard edge, wash, white, red. And I've found over the years, yeah, it's sometimes really nice. You want to do all these focuses. You want to have all this timing. I've found that, in my case, I have to do the timing myself. Because it's easy to set a chase time if you're running the same show all the time. But to be able to do it manually, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of people out there who, all run time code, all run this, and all run that. But there's one part you have to be concerned about, is if you lose code in the middle of the show, you got a real serious problem. What are you going to do? Make the show go on. It doesn't matter. If they're standing on stage and everything goes black, well, you better figure something out. Which is why, in the particular case of my Punt page, as you layer things in and you release stuff out, if you go to end up in a blackout and you're like, well, crap, there's no lights on, you want to have a fader that you can just bring up that brings up something. You don't want to have to bring up 3 faders and press 5 other buttons just to get a look on stage. So what I've done over the years is, based on the philosophies that I've been discussing here, is that it's easier to do the manual timing, and I do using 2 hands about this. I use one hand to just run all my color combinations. And as you can see on the screen right now, this is just hard edge and wash swap. That's it. And this was the plot that I just walked into. And with Chip's help and everything else, we got it all patched. But being able to just do this on the drum on 2 and 4, you get out of jail free card. If you have to release it, it's still there. The last thing you want to do is not be able to get it all back on. Another aspect that brings up, though, is all your fader priorities. One of the difficult things in fader priorities, and since desks like this with palettes and stuff have come out, is you have to worry about how your palettes are really recorded in, and you didn't record in a value, just a hard number, because when you update and merge and clone your show, and we'll get into a little bit of that later, as you merge and clone your show, we're going to have an issue, because when you update the palette and it doesn't track, well, what's the point? Now I have to make sure I go into that queue and fix it. So these, just being double stacked, are fine. So I have just a series of color combinations, some solids, some effects, and all these effects have no cue information in them except the effect. Writing cues into effects during a punt or during a festival is a dodgy proposition, because then you have to go to the effect and make sure that the cue information is removed. In this intensity fader, the last thing I want is to worry about if my effect is going to work, if it clones properly. And you can see now, I just brought up one fader. That's for the hard edge lights, and it's just an intensity fade. And of course, with the ChamSys, so I hold down S, I have my different speeds here, I have my times, I have my offsets, and I let it go, and it's stored. I don't have to re-record it, I don't have to rewrite it. Easy way to go. Then this is movement. Same thing. You hold this down, you can change all your parts, change all your speeds. There is a tap to time, which is here, so you can wave slow it down and do everything else. All of these 4 FX faders here are all based on things that are on the stage. The only things that have position in them are hard edge and the wash position ones. So we bring these up, we run with this, then we switch to the other side of the look. This is all the wash lights. And to make it simple, once I get all the palettes together, I make these 2 groups that are over here, hard edge and wash. And the reason being, you don't necessarily want your front wash in your wash effect. You know, especially if you don't have strobe or if you don't have spots and stuff, the last thing you want to do is turn on an effect that's going to override whatever's there. You know, it's potentially just going to cause issues because you're like, where's the color? Why is there color in my FX fader? You know, so that simplifies that. And here, same thing. Wash effects. Now, all 4 of these faders, this is where I was talking about a few minutes ago, is that fader priority is really important, and every desk seems to handle it in a different fashion. I like in this desk that, you know, you tap twice to see your cue, you tap 3 times to see all your fader options. Your release time, that's when you bring the fader down, it's how long it's going to take, but there's all these fader options and stuff, but under advanced, this first couple here, it says priority, playback priority. And we can look at that, and normal, mid, high, programmer, and above programmer. So normal, medium, and high, all these early color faders are all low priority. The only things that are higher priority, stepping above it, are things like strobe lights, and these override what's going on in the look. But as long as they still work, again, I just updated these 2 buttons, hard edge strobe here, wash strobe here, you know, and it works no matter what. You know, that's a matter of taste and how you like to run things, but I found, again, in trying to do this quickly, I mean, one of the worst shows I had to do was a couple of years back, we're running a festival in Italy, and we got there, and there was 22 minutes till we went on stage. And, you know, you're like, great, it was 3 straight trusses and video, but great, you have 22 minutes. Get it together. And fortunately, using the ChamSys, I personally travel with an MQ70 and an extra wing. It's 52 pounds, goes in a 1 Pelican, you can check it, you can go anywhere, and an upgraded MQ70 has 48 universes. Great, so you walk into these giant festivals, you see all these desks lined up, and you're like, hey, I just need a case, a patch, maybe some electricity, and let's figure out the network. Which is one of the interesting things is a lot of people who don't know this desk don't realize that the networking capability is pretty much what you'll see on everything. You know, sometimes that runs into a real problem because we all know we walk into giant festivals and, you know, there's network this, network that, you know, the video's on something else. And you're sitting at a festival waiting for somebody to come out and they're like, oh yeah, they'll be in at 11. You're like, well, load-in's 8. What am I supposed to do here? And of course, you know, if you don't get information forwarded to you, you can't even sit there and patch. So you got to do the best you can with it. Shift release to dump everything. Now, for those of you who used hogs back in the day, it was always pig release. Glad they kept the same syntax. But being able to dump it quickly is so helpful because, I mean, you could even use it as a look. You know, you're like, great, black, black. If you can do it on the beat, nobody's going to notice. But how you set your fader priority here, you can tell it, all right, if you release it, it goes back to Q1, which is what we're sitting in right now. But if you, you can tell it not to reset the list every time. You know, but that's a matter of preference and trying to overlay things properly. So this, again, being generic, I find that for each artist, I change all these color combinations that are across here. And, excuse me, when you walk into big festivals and stuff, there are times that I know I've gone out of my way, because, you know, you have delay tower, delay tower, delay tower. You got like 30 universes of delay towers. Well, great. I don't need to put in 30 universes of delay towers. If I'm doing a merge with an MA and putting them together, you can still use that as an outboard wing, which is helpful. So you don't have to take every universe in. I primarily concentrate on the stage, the levels there, and making sure that at least the box, the rectangle, is properly working. Everything else is negotiable. You know, if I need to go, all right, well, great, I want to turn these on and have a good time. You don't have to worry about all the excess stuff. You just worry about the stage, because let's face it, our responsibility is to the artist, you know, and As long as they're lit in their band, or if they don't have one, as long as they're lit and you can keep your color combinations and your timings moving, then great. The stuff in the audience, build me 5 faders, you know, or if you have a wing, you know, put down at the end color combinations to sit out that match ones you have. And one of the interesting things when going to do like DVD shoots and stuff, God forbid we have DVDs anymore, right? When going to do that, you're often going to bring in another group of people and everything else, but if you have that extra stuff, it's not necessarily required to put it in the full timing and the transitions that I'm showing here. Sometimes it is easier to just have a single color and just a fader that you can bring up and down. So as I step through these, you can see these are all the same thing. But then we want to get into more advanced stuff. So as we're looking here, it's going to steal, turn this off. Up here at the top, I have step-in overlays that do things like gobo and do stuff like that, because you want to use them, and some lights have, like the rings we have here, some lights have really cool functions, but patching them is sometimes a real pain in the tuchus. You know, when you're having lights, I mean, I remember some of the early large LED function lights. Some of them are, you know, 256 channels a fixture. And you're like, great, I could put 2 lights on a stream. I got like another 400 lights I'm supposed to do. Fortunately, this thing will do 200 universes out of the box. So it makes it a lot easier to deal with it. And if you have video, you can open this window, and if you use a Catalyst or Archaos and stuff, you can drag in all your thumbnails, which so simplifies what you're doing. And you can see here it says layer and layer and layer, and you'll see all your images. And I found that has been a lifesaver, especially when you're making things up and, oh yeah, it's my computer that has all the content. Well, then I need to make sure that works. You know, again, nothing worse than getting to a certain spot of the, you know, house lights go down, there's the video intro, you know, of whatever it's supposed to be, and there's nothing. And then everybody on your crew is like, shouldn't we have something on? And then you're in a lot of trouble. Excuse me. Then you're in a lot of trouble across this. So again, you know, these are all simple, and of course with the way this desk works, I always use hard keys for stuff. So group 1, at full, position 1, position 10. You know, it makes it easy, and one of the things I always liked about the ChamSys, especially when I started with the MQ300 and with all the travel desks, the 80s, the 70s, is that you can do hard keys like that. And if your brain happens to work that way, it simplifies the whole process and speeds it up. You know, if you have to go digging through screens, and when I first ended up on a 300, it only had the one screen in the middle, you know, giant 58 faders of stuff. And I found for the first time in a long time, I was looking at the stage instead of staring through screens, trying to do all this just to turn on some lights and give them a position. And let's face it, every keystroke you do is a quantifiable message of time. You don't have much time. And the faster you can get it done, then the faster you can actually get more stuff in. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're doing songs via structure, and you say you get a set list the day before, and you look at that and you're like, okay, well, I have this song programmed, I have this song programmed, I don't have that one, I don't have that one, I've never even heard of that song. One of the interesting things I found, and this is kind of a hack and a cheat, but do the first song, do the last song, do a couple in the middle if you have extra time. And again, this is if you're writing on all these cues. This is just a fast method, and part of studying the artist when you get it is, you know their hits. You know, you type in the artist's name on YouTube, and whatever their biggest song is going to be the first one to come up. So as long as you get those things done, because let's face it, people are going to remember the intro, they're going to remember you walking in, and they're going to walk out. And when they walk out, if the last song is just blah, people are going to be like, wow, that was a great show, except the lighting sucked. You know, that will influence your entire viewpoint of what you're trying to do and can make you shoot yourself in the foot sometimes. One of the other really quick things that I really like about this desk is being able to merge things in quickly. So I have all these faders here. If I want, we'll set you at full, position 10. Okay, great, that's there. Now, when I want to record this, I just hold S and hit record. And then it will say merge program with QID on playback 1. Great. That allows you to merge things in a quicker fashion without having to reach for your screen, here, there, everywhere else. And even in my groups, and more importantly in my color palettes, let's go to color, you can see these color palettes, they're in the same order I've had them in for 10 years. They've all been the same ones, but that's why there's space between some of them and stuff, because they're attached to the number that's in my memory. So it kind of simplifies that process if you don't even have to crack the palette open and say you and you and color 5 at full. Great. Then, of course, fun things like, all right, color 3 star cyan. And what that does, by hitting color, hitting a number, and then star, and then touching a new number, that actually puts fan timing into the programmer. Now, this cue is here, so color 3, blah. And then when you hit record, it will take that fanned timing and assign it into the cue. You don't actually have to go back into the cue and mess with timing and stuff. You can actually go through here and see that the fan has actually manipulated the timing that's in there. Simplifies doing stuff live. And because a lot of the stuff that I do, sitting and busking around, you know, having access to things like that is, I found a very good thing. And then being able to just hit record and go will simplify that whole process. So let's bring up this. I'm gonna make sure it's cleared out here. All right, so see I have gobos bouncing in and out. You know, you can do the same thing with gobo palettes. You can hit 3 is the 3 seconds, star means fan, and then just touch the palette. And being able to do stuff like this quickly, you know, you can just do that your timing. You know, that's the song. You got that going, but then being able to overlay the two, all of a sudden we have something a lot more complicated, you know, without having to go crazy looking for stuff or trying to do this or trying to do that. So I always have a set of fixed gobo and rotating gobo. And you can make, often I'll take the fixed gobo and the rotating gobo and I'll make a stack of them. And when you release it, you tell them not to reset to the first cue. So it'll pick back up right where you left off. See, we're at like cue 5 in the stack. You can just press the button, reactivate it, and it's still in the same place that you left it. So it doesn't have to go through the whole gobo wheel, or you don't have to step through 5 gobos to actually make it back to where you were. And you can assign that to per each fader and per the timing of things. And then rotating gobo, another thing. But again, in the greater world of festivals and everything else, fixed gobo and rotating gobo, great. Every hard edge light has a gobo. You know, most of them have rotating gobos, although not all these days. And sometimes I've found as a cheat, you know, the fixed gobo is just for like Sharpies. Yeah, you can put in those gobos, but put in the prism. It'll break it up. And as long as you record that into the gobo look, well then, now we have our scene. You know, it's in here. Doesn't matter what it is. As long as the button that you have there labeled does what it's supposed to do. You know, again, I don't really care what gobo is. I'll go through the wheel, I'll find it, and I'll store it. You know, and same thing with a rotating gobo. Why? You know, you can go and make sure you're doing things, but if you try and overthink it or complicate it, I mean, let's face it, all of us have spent hours writing certain songs. And you spend all that time writing the song, it has this really cool look at the end. It took you, you know, 45 minutes to get this cool pan and fan thing out. Great. Excuse me. The only person who's really going to notice that is you. People in the crowd are going to just go, okay, it changed in time, it did something. They're not lighting people. They just know it's different. So spending that time is great, again, when you have 8 or 9 trucks, you got 3-4 days to program, but don't overthink it. I know when I was younger, that was one of the things I always had an issue with. I'd have this great idea, this great thing, take all this time, use all these faders, and then, you know, it's a hip-hop artist. They end after the 3rd cue. You just burned a ton of programming time, and for what? You wrote a song with uses all the faders, and then all of a sudden they only use 3. You know, with hip-hop bands and stuff like that, I mean, let's face it, I don't know if you've had to run them, but so much time can be spent putting stuff together. I mean, I remember an artist I worked for, the first song, I typed in his name on YouTube, the top song that came up, I was sitting, getting all my stuff together, doing visualization, and I had the rig in another room. I went, I built all this out, and was like, okay. So I spent 2 hours on this. You know, that factor of time management is critical. You know, if you can get through and at least get in color and gobo, and, you know, if you have some strobes or stuff like that, as long as you have the buttons to do it, fine. You can always go, if you load in tomorrow, you can go and run that song 3 times and add the little minutia that make it, not only make it different, but they make it yours. You know, there's a certain personality to things, and especially with desks like the modern day, it's very easy to get caught up and stuff. And then you suddenly find out, wow, it's 3 days, I only have, you know, 10 songs. But the artist has like 400 or 500 songs, and you don't have a set list. Okay, so whenever I start programming, especially, you know, when you got a couple of days or, God forbid, a week to be able to do it, you know, was to always make sure my punt page was built first. Because then no matter what, where they go, whatever happens, whatever you manage to get done or not get done, you have something to use. And one of the fun things about this desk is this particular show file in here, with the exception of the patch that the guys here put together and everything else. I know I don't have to worry about it because it's really easy to stress yourself out, and that accomplishes nothing. And you're like, oh man, I don't have that 5 songs. Well, great. What are you going to do? Just put up a blue wash for that song? It's pretty unacceptable these days, you know. And again, God forbid you're doing video, because now you're talking 2 completely separate entities, 2 completely different sets of timing. It's always one of the real pains with video. I mean, I always just ran it out of my laptop when I'm doing one-offs, but video is 0 time, you know, and doing transitions and stuff, especially between layers, takes more time, you know. So you would go and you put in, you know, what you wrote for lights, and then hopefully there's only like 1 or 2 clips for the video, and you can just merge them in and be done with it. In a lot of cases, if you're doing very intricate video with a lot of timing, a lot of fades, a lot of layer crosses, or masking or stuff, it sometimes helps to write that out. You know, all right, for the intro, I have this clip. For the verse, I have this clip. For the chorus, I have this clip. Sometimes, again, because the people who are, for the lack of a better word, reviewing your show, that's what's going to matter. I mean, you got a giant video wall. Great. If it's dark and there's nothing on it, well, you don't want it to have what I call the black void effect. When you bring up a look, you're like, well, that's great. Add in some effects and everything else, cool. But there's the black hole in the back. And it's like, all right. Now, I personally like to turn it off sometimes because it breaks up the look. And let's face it, if every song there's video playing, that, again, sometimes in the people you're working for, that takes priority. I mean, there's a bunch of artists and stuff that I've worked with. They're like, yeah, I don't care about the lights. I know you got that. And you're like, "Ugh, okay, I just spent all this time." He's like, "Just show me the clip for the song." Okay, yeah, here you go. Here's a video clip. Great. It's like you'll get the other part. I don't need to worry about that or stand over your shoulder. But that kind of input is rather invaluable. What else? Let's see where I'm running here. So a lot of bands these days, especially the EDM bands, won't necessarily bring an LD. They will only bring a VJ, which means if you're the guy who's on site just running, they're like, all right, well, we don't have a lighting guy. And if you don't have something of this nature set up, or God forbid somebody else comes in and running in, our flight was late, we don't have any time, we got to go, do you have a page? Have that. And because of the simplistic way that I set this up, a lot of people, especially if they're not ChamSys users, a lot of people can figure it out in a very short amount of time. I mean, I've made the running joke that I can probably at least teach you the basics of building a page like this and stuff in an afternoon. Makes it simple, it's not overthought, it's not complicated. Now, let's face it, this desk has tons of options, tons of hot keystrokes and everything else. But you don't need to use them. It all depends on what you like and what you remember. Because, if you're trying to look around and find something, you're wasting time that you could just be getting your show finished. One of the other really complicated things is, of course, with video, how you choose to handle it. If you have a video guy who's going to play all the clips, or somebody sitting on the side of the stage running Resolume, cool. But if you have to run it, you got to make sure that's right. And a lot of times the mapping and getting things sized and getting things right. And I wouldn't write video into my Punt page. I would just put it in one of the nice exec pages, like this one over here, and it would just be video clips across it, so you could just tap it and tap it and tap it. But all we'd have to do is size it once, or send it to somebody to size it once, and then you don't have to worry about it. You can cross that off. So that's a cheap way I get around it. Also, because with most of the desks of this class, you can use your phone, you can use your iPad, and you go to setup under network, and there's a thing that says Wi-Fi. And right now it's disabled, but if you turn it on in the current versions of software and stuff, it gives you a QR code. And literally all you have to do is take your iPad, hold it up, it'll snap the QR code, it will automatically link it all together, and then I can come over here and just be like, yeah, okay. Well, now I have another playback touchscreen. Never mind remote focus for the stage and stuff. I mean, in a lot of cases, if the sun is blazing on the stage and stuff, I will take this and leave it on the side of the stage, because I don't usually bring my spares out the front of house. The fact that this can reset very quickly, I don't worry about it as much. But you need to be able to get at least a rough focus in, which is why I only have a couple for the Punt page. And as long as there's a nice focus, we got a couple of nice beams coming from each way. And as long as we have that in there, and I know that I'm going to press this button and it's going to work, then it allows you to suddenly say, all right, that fader is done. And with this, and the syntax with how this works, if you hit include, hit your fader, then parked in the programmer now is all your values, view levels. There you go. You can see every value that's recorded into that queue. And if you don't like what's in there, or you accidentally got like a strobe channel in there, with this, you grab the group of lights, let's say group 1, and then we can say remove beam. Hold down remove, hit color. Great, then just hit update, because include loads it in to the programmer, so you can do it quickly and take out values. I remember we used to have to do that all the time because the desk only had 4 megabytes. And tracking became a critical thing. In this day and age, with the power that most of these desks have, you don't have to worry about it. But if you go back through and you look at your programming, you're like, great. So if I include this effect, include hue, and then go to the programmer, view effects. Now, this window I often leave open. First off, it shows what different fixtures are recorded into there, but it also shows the FX, the crossfade, the speed, and the size. So here, you can just come and move the cursor around while your other hand is running stuff. Or you can reach up and touch it, and you can alter it, but you don't have to re-record it. So you don't have to go through and be like, oh, crap, that was in here. Because you loaded it into the programmer first. All the values are there. I mean, there's a lot of lights in this right now. I'm sure there's tons in some of my files here from all this. There you go. There's one that has, a lot of lights in it. Well, in this viz file, there's not that many lights in here. So if I include this, now you can see the hard edges are doing a chase. But the nice thing about this, you can either touch it here and change the digit, or it forwards it to all the encoders. So here's my parts, here's my offset, here's my width. All right, now I want to go to segments. Done. And then I don't have to do anything else. I just hit update and clear. But the FX values, once they're in there, if you edit it, it's going to keep whatever time value you changed. And next time you bring up that fader, it's going to have the same thing in it. So you don't have to re-record it. You can just do it live. If you hold this down, now I'm holding down the select button over the fader. You can see this is where it has all the times: delay, fade, individual parameter timings. Intensity, you want your intensity to be a 0. You want your position to be at 8 seconds to move over there. You can put all of those into here. And if you have a group of lights selected, it will specify which one. So you can do it on every function like this. Let go, and it saves it. Now, there's one thing that sometimes is a little weird to find. I actually remember when this desk first came out, I was very annoyed one day because under activate and release, there's this thing right here that says release time, because the fade and delay and the timer window doesn't talk about release. But now, let me... You set that to 5. Now we release it, and it takes a nice 5-second fade out. And now it's in there. No more recording. No more trying to stick more things in. I don't have to re-record it in the fader and everything else. Set, 0, enter, and now it's exactly back to where it was. So it's an easy way to get around it, but also under activate and release here, you can see halt at last step, release at last step, all of these things. Activate on page change. That's a good one if you have a work light queue somewhere and you go to the next page and the work lights automatically come up. So you can save yourself some of that time. Fader interactions and buttons, you can see there are a ton of options around here. Sometimes, depending on the function, whether it's FX or Qs, you have to really look at this, faders and buttons, because all of these are how your interactions are going to happen. And sometimes you're like, flash always swaps. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. Flash is now a go and pause. So now my flash button is now a go button on it. So you have to really look when you get one of these desks or you're starting a show. I would, especially if it's an artist I work for, I would go and load in my old show that already had 30 or 40 songs in it. And I would go and then would blank the patch. Just remove all. So patch, say all here. You select everything, remove it. Just take it so the patch will be blank. You put in your new patch, but when you go back to your faders, all these cue lists and stuff are still here. There's nothing in them, but you don't need to reset your fader priority. You don't need to reset your button priority. You don't need to do anything. All that stays. All you have to do is step through each cue like here and be like, okay, great. I know this yellow cue. I need a 3-second this. I need a 3-second that. Oh, here's a blue. All that timing tracks. Even the split timing tracks across the whole thing, which again is, been a lifesaver when you're like, okay, I have 3 days to put together a 6-week tour. Well, that's a tall order there, but we'll get it done. Then some other things, beam effects like this. great. You put in a little bit of time, you have them, but the nice overlay is when I suddenly do this, and then I go, okay, out here, and then I'm just, great, there's a big chorus. You know, have a nice day, the chorus ends, you turn those back down, and you're back at the stage, and you can still keep your timing. It's also interesting to mention that when I'm bringing up the FX intensity for the hard edges, I have it on LTP, I believe. Fader. Fader controls HTTP channels, just third one down. So if you kind of want to black it out, but actually don't have to build buttons for it, you just bring it up just a little bit, and nobody will see it. You know, none of these fixtures until you're past 5%, you'll really notice that it's there. So you can kind of use it as a blackout button without really having to do a blackout. Also, you know, you're in a hurry, you miss the first part of the bridge, you just bring it down and it all stops. Sorry, I keep having to refer to my notes. Oh yeah, so here's something very important. Especially if you come up with a new desk or your first time using one of these, don't overload yourself. It's very easy to have everybody walk up and be like, hey, dude, so can you do this? Can you do that? You got 4 different band members trying to tell you stuff. It's easy to say yes, and it's hard to say no. You know, you don't want to tell your artist, you're like, well, no, I can't do that in 5 minutes. How about we do it tomorrow? But it's very easy to overload yourself, and unless you're really fast and everything else, and keep a good memory of it, you might forget about it. And then it'll be tomorrow, and they'll be like, dude, I told you I wanted that song blue instead of red. And you're like, oh, man, I forgot. And let's face it, the best thing you can do at that point is be like, dude, I forgot it, I'll fix it tomorrow, you know? Or right when the show ends, just go back and fix that cue because they're going to turn the rig off to load out. As long as you still have front of house power, especially with the visualizer, once you get the visualizer loaded right, you can just go sit and go, oh, okay, it should have been this instead of red. Okay, so that it's an easy way to. Let me rephrase that. It's hard to remind yourself that you only want to do what you know you can handle. Again, if you keep accepting stuff and everything else, it's very easy to get into the hole that you're like, great, I have 12 songs to write, I have 1 hour this afternoon. All right, so yeah, no, I can't do that. And one of the important things I've always realized is that as long as you have 3 reasons for anything that happens, any discussion, why are we moving the truss? Well, because there it's a dead hang, and there we have to put in bridles, and the bridles are going to make it 15 feet lower. Okay, now let's face it, people on stage aren't going to notice that. You are, you know, and people who are in production may realize it, but as long as you have a good reason, great, I was trying to speed up, load in, load out. I have to refocus it anyway because it moved up, and you know what? I wanted to see a different angle because maybe it's better that it's 5 feet upstage instead of 5 feet downstage. So just have your answers ready and make sure you know where to find it in the desk. And if you can't, there's always somebody to call. There's always somebody to call. And you know, if the PA is playing, obviously nobody's going to hear it. But there's always somebody who knows an answer, because especially with this desk and many of the modern desks, there's so many options and so many different ways to do it. You don't want to get trapped in it. This is an important one. When you go and sit and spend, like, as some of my friends and I have done, a month programming a show and working 7 days a week, all-nighters, you need to find a space to take time for yourself. Burnout is a real thing. You know, we all want to get done. We all want it to be the coolest thing ever. However, it doesn't do you any good if you're so brain fried. You're like, oh, crap, man. And, you know, if you're using visualizers and stuff, it's very easy to go through and turn your visualizer on and cues on and be like, oh, why is this why, I forgot, why is this not working right? Why is this not working right? Or God forbid, you wake up, walk back in, you review the last 3 songs you wrote, and you're like, whew, I don't even know what I was thinking. You know, I mean, it happens, but the longer time you have the program, and again, some of the artists I've worked with, great, it's a month, you know, and by the end of 30 days, and then like the first 2 shows, you're like, all right, dude, yeah, little fried. Let's try the first show, see where we're at, but you know, you don't want the first show to be a catastrophic failure. So some of the other fun things about some of this is this add swap button is very helpful right here. Turns it into add swap mode very quickly. So that can really help you out if you're trying to do certain things. Then also here, go to. Go to is to skip queues in a queue list. So let's say we have a queue list right here. We turn this one on, turn that off, and then we say go to 2.0, enter. Great. Go to 5.0, whoops, there you go. It's an easy way to skip around, especially if you're in a hurry or if you have written out your songs in a single queue list. If they change the song or something happens or they move around, you need to be able to understand how to work within the structure that you built. One of the reasons I really like to program my own stuff, especially once ChamSys came out with their stuff, one of the things I'm always big on is I program my own stuff. You know, a lot of people who are very busy and stuff don't have the time or became such a high-level LD that, you know, they go out for a week, they look at it, they're on to the next job. If you ask them if they ask you where something is on a fader and stuff, in most cases, they don't know. You made it. So keeping track, at least a mental keeping track, is kind of important when you look at like verse, chorus, bridge, blah, blah, blah. Let's see here, if maybe I have one. Oh, here we go. Palette work, VJ rig, DJ opener. That was another one. That's just logos and stuff for that. Palette work just turns on groups so you don't accidentally record your intensity into your position. Although with the filtering system, you don't have to worry about it. You can see this one's laid out differently, but that's for a different show because when you have different rigs every day, it's very easy to get your head confused. It's like you go to the hotel and all of a sudden you go up to the 3rd floor, you go to room 5 or 302, put your key in the door, and it doesn't work. And you're like, really? Okay, so I'm gonna go downstairs. You're like, look, I need a new key for room 302. They're like, you're not in 302. You're like, what? They're like, you're on the 5th floor, dude. You're going to the wrong place. Which is why keeping things like this clear, I know what's in every one of these faders. I know what's in every one of these buttons, and I know what they all do. And again, the button doesn't care what's in it. It doesn't matter. All it knows is that there's 2 cues that you're going through. Not that crazy. Sorry, again, sorry I have to keep referring to my notes, but everybody all right so far? Okay. Oh, all right. So another critical aspect that all of us have dealt with is the budgets. And with a lot of big desk systems these days, that becomes such a big line item. You're like, great, so I have to rent a console, I have to rent a couple of processors, and that itself is going to cost, you know, $2,000, $3,000 a week. Well, great. If your budget is only $12,000 a week, you still got to get truss, you still got to get motors. Great, now you have 20 lights. Which, you know, if you're playing in a club or something, it's fine. But as soon as you try and go play an outdoor amphitheater or something like that, it's not going to cut it. So, you know, they have this one. They have the nice wing that goes with it with a 3rd screen. But if you're doing smaller venues and everything else, you can see around the room here, there's 80s, there's quick cues. All of these other versions, again, have the same, not same universe count, but I mean the 80s and the 70s, they have 48 universes. That's more than enough to run anything. So the cost to ratio value, whatever you get done when you put your first gear list together and budget, they're going to say there's too much stuff. And you're like, all right, well. So if you can get around, everybody wants the best of the best and the biggest of the biggest. Give me more. But it doesn't always go over well as far as budget. So I always go through the point where I always add in extra lights and other stuff. So the ones that I plan on cutting. So when management comes back and says, this is too expensive, you can cut out that whole type of light or a dozen lights and be like, okay, it's cheaper. They'll begrudgingly agree because let's face it, a lot of people in those roles don't understand how this matters or why you would need all that money in a console. Well, there's a reason. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I'm quick on. And what do you expect me to do? I mean, a lot of people and stuff, the artists will say, all right, I want a flying surfboard. And you're like, okay, well, we need motion control guys, because I'm not running that off the console. FX, like cryo and stuff like that, you want, but you got to be careful with that because if you are going quickly and not paying attention, it's really easy to occasionally activate something you don't want, like CO2 jets, for example. Really not fun when you're sitting there and you just hit enter and they start going off. The tank only has 30 seconds. But that's where the budget stuff comes crazy. And I find that to be a very large influencer about things. So the other thing that this system really does well, and again, why I always carry around, my travel console, is that up here where it says clone and it says morph. A couple of things about that. Clone is to make more of the same light. So you walk into a festival, you got 10 lights in your rig, there's another 30 lights out there. So you select your first 10. You can hold down shift and just arrow down, or you can drag on it, but again, I'm more of a button kind of guy. And then choose head, we'll say, then it would, wait, let me, sorry, up a folder. Let's go grab something out of Chauvet's library here. Oops. Up a folder. Chauvet Pro. Okay, so I know, the hard edges. Here's a Maverick Storm profile. What mode do you want it? 38, 55, okay. Now, if you don't have the right profile, it is possible to add channels and minus channels or try and copy another light to build a new profile, but that's a whole nother tale. Anyway, so I have this, I had my 38 channels. Now with these ones here, now that I have these selected, I can hit morph, or more importantly, I can hit clone too. Clone heads, make a copy, yes. Now, I want to bring palettes and cues with that. Split FX is for running different groups in a different way with how the FX work. Anyway, I hit this, I hit done, and now down at the bottom of my whole thing here, here's more lights. Now I can go, and now the key thing with morph is that I personally always go through and clone the number of fixtures before I try and morph and change them into something else. And there's a very good reason for that I learned in a very hard way when I first started using this system, is that once you hit morph, the console is going to interpret the two types of lights, like this group you have here, and once I change that, it needs to be all the fixtures that you have in the rig for morph, because if you morph and have half and half, like this part, I have just normal performances. The channel morph will sometimes interpret. It will think, all right, so there's a red color in there. Sometimes it will put in the red color wheel instead of putting in your CMY mixing. So when having to do this, and again, I've done it for a couple of festivals here and there, is that I've found always clone up how many. Now, in this patch, you'll see there's tons of stuff in here that's unpatched. This is one of my touring profiles. And another interesting trick is if you say we have, we have a Mac 2Ks or the Maverick in there, it's important to keep track of what you've done. Now, a lot of people also get caught up on fixture numbers. you get a plot. 101 through 112, you know, is the Mavericks. You know, the next one is the strobes. 201 through 206, these ones right here. Don't get caught up on the numbers, especially if you're under a tight timeline and everything else. Because let's face it, once you put your patch together and you put a fixture number on it, and you can put anything on it. I mean, I have ones up here in the thousands. It doesn't matter because now I've made a group. So whatever I want, it doesn't matter to the patch. It doesn't matter to you. The only time it would really matter is if you're calling backstage and you're like, dude, like 103 is acting weird, reset it. But in the generic terms, it's in the group. It's already there. So you can worry about that, but that can sometimes, especially if you have a massive system, that can take a lot of extra time to go through and try and match their numbers, and maybe you don't like their numbering system. I mean, I always use the 100s for hard edge, 200 for a second hard edge if there is. Strobes are always 800. FX for cryo and stuff are always 900. Doesn't matter how many lights are in it, it doesn't care. So anyway, there's another interesting part about that. But if you make sure you clone before you morph, otherwise you're going to have to go back through. The palettes are going to be different, as I gave with the Reddit explanation. The palettes will be different, everything else. So another thing in here, this edit head, names, DMX channels, and we view channels. So this is for a Maverick Storm. Now, you can see in here, there is instant, locate, default, all the highlight and low light stuff. That default, especially if it's a newer light or something else, especially in color systems across companies, is that the color system at 0 may be a full flag in. The color system at 100 might be a full flag in. But sometimes you'll grab a group of lights, you'll turn them on, you pan them up towards you, you're like, okay, cool. You pan them up towards you, and you suddenly realize that no light's coming out. And you're like, okay, well, why is that? I have the lights on, the dimmer's open. Well, it's because either the color wheel's in or the wall, the CMY is backwards. So it's good to know where to get to that, which is under patch. You have to choose your head first. So like right here. Okay, great. So we choose current head. Oops. Hit Shift. Choose current head. What that means is any spot that the cursor is on, it's going to pick that one. And up here on this blue line, you can see what it says. That's what's selected. Once you have that selected, you can hit Edit Head, and here's what's in there. You have type of channel. Dimmers are usually HTP. Other functions are usually LTP. Highest takes precedence or lowest takes precedence. The color system that's in there. What encoder it's assigned to. Well, that one's a little important because if you have to add a channel or do something else, you're like, where the heck is my channel? And you can see the other things in here, but invert and the highlight value. You can change all these, and then once you change it, you can save it, and then I can just go and take these and go through and do my clone and morph and that kind of stuff. And if you tell it to morph, like you had to add a channel or something else, it will put the new fixture profile in. But color flags being backwards is a very, very popular thing to run into these days. So sometimes in an emergency, like you bring this in, and you realize all of a sudden that like a light is going to start to go bad or something else. It's important that an emergency, to park a fixture. If a pan is bad or whatever else, get it as close as you can, hit park. Now, I will tell you, sometimes people forget, and I didn't know it when I first started using this desk, but park is up here. So you grab your fixtures, you park them, and then to unpark them, you got to hold down Shift, and then there's the unpark button. There are times that when I first started using this, I couldn't find the unpark button. And I used to drive myself nuts on more than one occasion when I first started using this. I wouldn't know where the unpark button was, so I'd be like, all right, screw it. I'll turn the desk off, turn it back on, or it should all be there. No, it's not. And that was one of those cases where I said, you need to make a phone call to somebody. You got, like, dude, where's the unparked button? Oh, it's right there. Great. Okay. In a lot of cases, or in some people's personality, they don't like to use the programmer during a show. Now, I can understand why, because you can certainly mess up what you're doing. But remember, there's always the blind button. So I'm going to take group 1, color 2, and then when I undo my blind, it's in red now. Let me bring this all down. So don't be afraid to use blind as almost another button to go with it. Just remember it's there. Otherwise, you shift release, blind is still active, and you're like, why? I need to pull in my special. I don't know where it is. Again, we already talked about fan timing, which is, again, a very helpful, very quick thing. The other thing is, when you put in fan timing for a programmer select, blind will block it out, but it will keep the fan timing across the interface. So it's good to be able to do that. So you can run just a peel, blind, undo, so you can use it as kind of an on-off button. Very handy thing. We've talked to a degree about priority and how important that is. You know, it's also one of the things where you bring up this, and then I want to bring up another fader, and all of a sudden, it took the value of some of the lights, but not the other lights, because you don't have this set for high priority. That's especially important when running with FX and stuff like that, because the way this is all set, all the looks are static, all the FX are high priority. So I can override things and bring them down, and then they'll all just return to the queue. You know, so you can save yourself. But if you're having issues about one fader overriding another, go to your settings and check advanced, and where it says playback priority, which is the fourth one down. Set, again, we looked at this real quick, but that's how all these effects override these individual looks. And again, you can keep doing this all day while these are going. And when you're doing big shows and big festivals, sometimes you forget. You know, you'll be going so fast during the day, and then you'll hit the show, and you'll be like, wow, all right, I got 2 cues right here, but they're the same cue. Oops, I forgot to write the change cue. Great, so you hit blind, grab these guys, and put them in yellow, take wash lights, put them in cyan, these, color 8, and then blind, look, it's all there. But you can keep it in blind and hit record and put it into which queue. Just make sure you know which queue you're in. Over the crossfade that's right here, these are just manual steps, which is why when I have something selected, this big play button works. No matter which one of these I'm at. And it frees up my other hand, so I can get to all my other buttons. And all you got to do is keep that count, and it allows you to take your brain and start to look at other stuff that you might have to do. Oh crap, there's a strobe cue coming up, there's a big part coming up. I know it's coming, but I have to be prepared to deal with it. I heard mention using an old show file blank in the patch, because it keeps all the options and settings. Oh, this one's pretty funny. So, carrying my own desk around is wonderful. Again, it's a 50-pound Pelican, it's a 70 and a wing. Love it. However, the airlines do occasionally lose it. Now, you may or may not have one of these there. They may or may not have the production have one there. But you need to be prepared to have to write your show on another desk, which is part of the reason that I usually keep this format, because no matter which desk I need or which desk I'm on, I know that the first fader is going to be red and no color. Great. Second fader is going to be cyan and magenta. I know that no matter where I am, what desk I'm on, I can get through a night. I mean, I've had my console lost for like 3 days over in Europe, and every day was somebody else's desk, somebody else's desk. So I have a USB key especially with the advent of offline editors and stuff, where I have a show file for almost every desk with this in there. Yes, you have to patch it. Yes, you're going to have to update it, but you're going to have to do that anyway. But because the buttons are relatively in the same place, and let's face it, most consoles, their job is to hold and record channel values. Okay, so that's more of a backup thing or an emergency, or you get to the gig, you're like, where's my desk? And they're like, well, we couldn't get it. I was like, well, did anybody call me? No. Great. Okay. What did I write here? Merge. Not always take over that. Using the merge. Oh. So, in a lot of cases, because some of the other competitors' desks, what you have to do is take this and the output of this, the ArtNet out, put it in the port on another console, and then merge things. And they still have control, but you're just sending in your data. Now, there's only one issue with that, and that's you need to take the desk that you're going into and patch every single channel value at 0. Because the way that the merge works is you can hit release all you want, right? Great, I released it. The light should go here, the light should go there. And you try and tilt it, and you only get and go just straight down. You can't get back up stage. That's because the other desk is still sending a 50% value to the light, because that's the park value. You know, you release everything, it goes to 50-50, and you're like, great, I can do 50 to 100. So when doing the merge thing, that's something critical to know, because if people don't know about doing that, it's easy to get really confused and really overlaid. What else do I have next? Oh, another nice aspect about the merge thing is if you're merging into another desk, that desk will be able to take over your values. But if you only have something that has, this has 15 faders, but you really need 20 faders. Well, what you can do is take the other desk, and be able to bring up the value on it and add it as basically another fader wing. So you can sometimes get a jail-free card, or if the console you're using doesn't have enough universes. I mean, a lot of these fixtures and a lot of these units lately, you know, the ones we were talking about earlier, where it's half a universe per fixture, sometimes you just don't have enough. I mean, you know, with this, great, I got 200. I can pretty much do anything I've ever seen, except for maybe like the Super Bowl. You might need a couple more channels or something like that. But again, with the advent of the 80, which is 48 universes, and the 70, which is 24 universes, but upgradable to 80 with no hardware change, by the way, made it really easy when you're like, uh-oh, I need more universes. Well, it's possible to add them into the 70. All right, another interesting aspect is if you're making a show and the artist likes your show, it's very important to keep at least the same colors and the same stuff, which is why, of course, I love this, to be able to just go and to be able to go in and realize that your truss isn't where it's supposed to be. None of the lights are what it's supposed to be. I mean, one of the nightmare situations that if you use this all the time, it will happen. You'll go into a festival, and you'll be like, all right, where's the patch? And you get down to that one light, and you see like tons of them, like LED tubes and stuff, and you're like, I don't have that profile. Can you tell me what company made it? Nope. But with this, you can go into the patch and add, you take one of these other fixtures, and you will find one that's the same, or they're running it in a mode you don't have. So you go, you edit it, you say, all right, edit head. And by doing that, now you can come and change it, or right here it says insert, you can add in more channels. Then you have to relabel them and everything else, but you basically can build a new profile without needing to pull out your laptop, without needing to do anything crazy. The worst you often have to do is to pick up your phone or have them look up what the parameters lists are. But that's saved my butt so many times across the board. What else? Sometimes, and this is kind of a personal thing, but kind of not. Sometimes, you know, you have a bad day. You know, you got to a certain cue and you're like, oh man, I know I was supposed to black out right there, I didn't. Easy to beat yourself up. Now, by running shows, especially in the music industry, at some point you're gonna press a wrong button or a wrong fader. It's just gonna happen. But one thing you need to be very sure of is that it doesn't destroy the rest of your show. Head down, just put through it. Oh, darn it, I brought up the wrong fader. Okay, wait for a change, bring it back where it's supposed to be. As long as you, again, if you programmed it, you know where everything is. All the palettes are yours, the way you have them laid out. I personally usually lay them out like this, stage out, coming down. So groups, the top one is always the all group. All these other ones coming down are the breakout of fixtures to different trusses, upstage, downstage, mid, that kind of stuff. Sometimes you don't have the time. Sometimes you don't have the time, you know, and that's where blind and everything else comes in handy, because you can fix it while the show's going on. But you got to have enough clarity of thought to remember that, okay, I have to do this. All right, well, now I can come over here and go like this, and go like this, and go like this, and go, yeah. And you don't lose anything. Now, this is just a personal preference, but for me, one of the things I like is that if you take your group windows, your position windows, and everything else, I have them set so when you press the button, they'll all front. So if I'm looking for group 1, position 2, color 5, at full. So I don't have to think about it. I don't have to go looking for it. Save myself the headache. Another important thing is not so much, yes, there's getting things done, but there's making it overcomplicated. If you make things simple, like this show file that I'm using right here, great. It has 2 focuses. It's got a stage, it's got an audience. Now, yeah, I want a high X, yeah, I want this cool thing from the floor. Well, it's daylight, so you can guess, you know, if it's the lights on the stage. One of the things that I've always liked is, you know, you're at a festival, you're going to set change, and you're like, great, I got to check 5 focuses instead of trying to test the whole thing out. So, other than that, clone morph. Anybody have any questions or anything else? That's pretty much most of the notes that I had for this. If not, Mr. Chip.
All right. Yeah, we'll turn to the chat for just a second and let them gather up some questions. Some of the people that are here, does you have any questions for Jason? Anything they want to ask him? Here, we got a mic so everybody can hear you, Moni.
As long as it was written down and I had the profiles to.
You want to reiterate that for just a second?
I was asking how long it would take to put together a show with the current rig in the showroom.
As long as you have the profiles, and I'm very picky about it, when somebody gives me a patch, put it on a piece of paper. Just hit print. Trying to go through your phone when people are calling you and texting you, the radio's going off, give me a good patch. The other thing that's critical to that is, how did they put the patch together? So they take the first 2 lights, then they put the strobe, then they put the next 2 lights. Well, that's great. So now I got to patch 2 lights, switch to a different fixture, clone, morph, and patch that, and then you go to the next 2 fixtures. So you're jumping all over in the patch. One of the best things when you walk into big festivals, and operators and lighting guys who know what they're doing with it, you know, you have all these lights that are, that they're in order. Come up to the top here. So these, you know, 1, 41, 81, 21, they're in order. So you can select them all, holding down Shift, type in the first number, and it will automatically populate what's after that. And in a lot of cases these days, it's like, all right, well, these first 6 are on the mid-stage truss. The next 6 are on the upstage truss. So as long as you have those things and the patch is done right, and you don't often have much say in that, but as long as you did it, to clone this out and build it, maybe 45 minutes. But you have to know, and that's why in my patch there's a lot of other fixtures that are in there, because I'll leave one or two of them just to clone and morph from. So you just clone it, copy it, it'll show up at the bottom of the patch, then morph it over. But again, make as many lights as you need, but that's why, again, in this patch, there's a lot of things that are not used. They're just unpatched because they are just made for a clone source only. If you have some of the nice big LEDs like that, well, then you probably want to clone it from another LED light that's round like that. But you got to remember, especially in this case, these are all odd evens. No big deal. But you don't want to clone. You need to keep your hard edge lights cloned to one side, because this is all hard edge and wash. So no matter how many hard edges there are, I want it all to be the same. Now, it'll be close, but you need to keep the same source. So if I want to add more hard edge lights or morph more hard edge lights, then I'm going to really need to make sure I have a good clean source to take it from. And that will save your butt and save a lot of time. Because once you have it patched, in theory, you could actually start to deal with this. You bring up the fader, and all of a sudden there's a cue there. Now, it might not be focus straight, it might not have all the colors, but one of the things that, again, I love about this desk is as long as you keep your source where things are cloned from, it'll be close. So it saves you a lot of time. And again, whether it's 5 lights or 500. So.
Very good. So we got some questions from online.
Sure.
People are asking, do you use the execute for anything?
Do I use what?
Do you use the execute screen for anything?
Oh, yeah, quite frequently.
What do you put on there usually?
Use strobes. The bottom 3 are usually atomics or whatever, or those things. That's sync strobe is 9, random strobe is 10, 11 is the lock-on blast, 12 is always moles. Always have a mole fader somewhere. Then the middle one is for the fixtures, hard edge strobe, wash strobe, a random all, and then this 8 I would use as a strobe for the video content. So I'd be able to overlay that onto this while it's running whatever.
So a lot of what you put on the execute screen is going to be flashes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So more buttons.
Flashes on the bottom, and this 1 through 4 up here. 1 is always work lights. 2 is we have any more questions, thoughts, concerns?
We will in just a moment.
42.
Just a moment. Like the stream should be coming back up. We had a quick little glitch there. Let me check my end of it, make sure we still see it.
I don't know the answer to that. You and I have been being on hogs for so long. One of the reasons I like this is it's the same thing. You know what? It's been something I really enjoy this desk because again, it's from the old hog
So we
days.
have the stream back now. I'm not sure where it cut off. That last question I received, I think we missed, the one from Glenn, which is do you have a document? Yes?
Do I have a
Do
document?
you have a document? Is this all in writing? And I think I answered that. No,
Yeah.
It's all in his head,
Yeah.
as most of us keep it. Maybe you'll see a book when he gets ready to retire.
I already started one.
You already started one, so look forward to
About
The
80
Life
pages
and
in.
Times with Jason Bullock.
Yeah, that's actually one of the titles that I've been working on.
There you go.
But a lot of it is, and a lot of what I hope people gain from this conversation today, a lot of this and the way it's set up is based on your philosophy of lighting. You know, your view of how a show should look, and then more importantly, how to execute that on a regular basis. You know, because let's face it, if the song is red, and then you go in the next day and all of a sudden the song is green, somebody somewhere is going to go, dude, why is that all a different color? You know, artists get used to a certain feel for certain colors and certain timings. I will say one of the big important things in my operation is that having strobes on the, the and of 4 as your transition part is a very quick thing to have. If you're following the drummer's lead, he's going to notice that it's off. So there are some drummers you can stare at and see they're very telegraphic about it. So you're just like, oh, yeah, I got it. Cool. Let's go. But then there are other artists where, they're all playing it down low, and you're like, I don't know this music very well, but I don't know what's happening. So it's good to keep an eye on the stage because that will, obviously influence your playback. I think that's...
All right. Looks like the chat's slowing down a little bit, probably partially because of our little glitch we had there. But I think the last thing we were going to try is I had a song queued up here. Let me see if I can get it back after our little glitch. And we were going to put Jason on the spot and see if he can do what he does.
Heck yeah.
Now, I have a disclaimer for you, Jason. That table is not your table for knit, all right?
I won't stand on it.
It will
then.
break in half if you go all out.
Well,
So I'm going to do a little sound check here,
and
we're going to make sure we can hear this track everywhere. And then I'm going to cut you loose on a couple-minute track. That should be coming through right now. Yes, this is royalty-free music. All right. You got a little taste of it.
yeah,
You ready, buddy?
heck yeah.
All right, let's do it. All right, there we go. Let's me unmute you here, Jason. Turn this down so we don't get any ads. There it is. You back now?
Yeah.
Little hot in the house here. So that's what we got for you. Thank you for coming, Jason. Thank you for sharing with us what you do. We're hoping we'll see more of this kind of stuff from ChamSys with you and events in the future. If you'd like to ask any additional questions of Jason, I'm sure he'll keep one eye on the ChamSys stream for this. So feel free, if you're watching this after the fact, watching the recording, if you have a question, ask it. If he can't answer it or he's too busy, we'll try as the ChamSys staff to try to answer the questions for you too. So thank you everybody for coming, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.
And thank you.
Thank you. And everybody in person, thank you as well.